Foundations of Amateur Radio. Having been a licensed member of this community since 2010, I feel qualified to answer a recurring question. What kind of hobby is amateur radio? The single best answer I can give is that it's big. The deeper you become involved, the bigger it gets. I stole the phrase amateur radio is 1,000 hobbies in one, and I've remarked that I suspect that it's underselling the experience. Point being, whatever you've heard about amateur radio is likely true, and guaranteed to be only part of the story. There was a time when amateur radio was a concept regularly seen in general discussion. That's no longer the case, but you'll soon discover that amateurs are everywhere, and the things we get up to still make the headlines from time to time. That said, as a community we tend to use complex language and in specific ways. For example, a radio amateur is unlikely to broadcast, instead they transmit. From the outside looking in, the two are synonymous, but within amateur radio the two couldn't be more different. Broadcasting is one-to-many, transmitting is one-to-one. Broadcasting separates the operator from the equipment. Transmitting has the operator actively engaged with it. Amateur radio is about curiosity, about trying things, about learning and sharing. It's about technology, electronics, nature and physics. It's about software and hardware, about camping and competing, and plenty more. And with that come friendships that seem to last a lifetime. Perhaps forged in the fire of fascination, perhaps made almost perchance in passing. I have more amateur friends than not, and among us we have a massive variety of interests. Unlike most hobbies, you need to obtain a government-issued license to become a fully licensed amateur, as in be permitted to transmit. For some, this requirement might be a deterrent, but once you understand why, since radio waves don't stop at political boundaries and every human shares the same radio spectrum, licensing becomes a necessity, not an obstacle. That said, you can start long before then, by receiving. No license required. Amateur radio is a global activity. It's centrally regulated but administered locally in each country and locality. As a result, I cannot tell you specifically how much things will cost where you are, but the fees are generally not cost prohibitive and in many cases they are low or even free. You become licensed by completing a training course, passing an exam, and receiving a certification that lasts for life. Once you are certified, you can apply for a call sign and operate an amateur station. The closest equivalent to a call sign outside the hobby is a car license plate. It's a unique combination of letters and numbers that identify an amateur. For example, my call sign is VK6FLAB. Said phonetically, it's Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo. We use phonetics because often individual letters are lost due to interference, which comes in many different forms. Depending on where you are, a call sign might be subject to a renewal fee. If doing a course and passing an exam seems scary, getting started at the introductory level is generally a weekend worth of effort. That introduces the notion that there are different levels, or, to use an amateur phrase, classes, which again, depending on where you are, permit different access to the radio spectrum, where your Wi-Fi, mobile phone, garage door opener, emergency services, aviation, satellite and free-to-air television all share the same limited resources with radio amateurs. The higher your license class, the more access you get, but the more you become responsible for. Again, using a car analogy, you graduate from moped to car to truck. If you've come across this hobby before, you should consider that one of the historic international license requirements hasn't existed for decades, namely Morse code. Mind you, some countries still require Morse, but their numbers are dwindling rapidly. There is an often repeated concept that amateur radio is old white men sitting in the dark talking to each other about the weather, their station and their ailments. While there's some of that around, you'll soon discover that there's people from all walks of life, all ages and interests and backgrounds. Given that this is a global experience, you do not need to limit your interactions to people within your local community. I've been contributing a weekly article about amateur radio since 2011, detailing the many and varied aspects of this hobby, and if you're curious about what you might find here, warts and all, jump in. There are 2 series of articles, What Uses in FCall, which covers 2011 to 2015, when it was renamed to Foundations of Amateur Radio. Available as an audio podcast, as text, as email, and there are ebooks too. You'll find plenty of amateur radio resources online and social media communities with different interests and sensibilities. As with any community, amateur radio has its share of gatekeepers who hark back to the days of yore, some literally, some in their language and behaviour. Don't let that dissuade you from exploring this magical community. Feel free to drop me an email, cq@vk6flab.com, and I'll do my best to answer any burning questions you're left with. I'm Onno, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.